No matter how well rehearsed, every play must eventually end. And when the house lights come up, the person left standing center stage isn't always guaranteed to be smiling. This is the story of how the carefully constructed theater of my life came crashing down. The divorce agreement was placed on the dining table just as I was ladling the osso buco onto a plate. Daniel Thorn sat opposite me, the cufflinks on his tailored suit jacket the very pair I'd had repaired for him last week. He pushed the stack of papers toward me, his index finger tapping lightly on the final page. "Sign it." I set the ladle down, slowly wiping my hands on a cloth napkin. Ignoring the agreement, I placed the plate of food in front of him. The osso buco had been braising for 3 hours. It used to be his favorite meal. "Eat it while it's hot." "Evelyn." He frowned, his voice already laced with impatience. "I'm being serious. I know." I untied my apron, folded it neatly over the back of a chair, and finally sat down. I opened the agreement. The terms were brutally simple. The house was his. The cars were his. The savings accounts were his. The message was crystal clear. I had come into this marriage with nothing, and I would leave with nothing. The legalese wasn't Daniel's style. It had the sharp, unforgiving tone of his mother. Margaret Thorne wasn't present, but her fingerprints were all over every clause. I flipped to the last page. "And Lily? Lily stays with me." Daniel said it without even looking up from his phone. My hand froze. "What did you say?" "The child stays with me." This isn't up for debate. He finally locked his phone and looked at me. "You don't even have a place to live. How are you going to raise her?" "I'm her mother. And because you're her mother, you should think about what's best for her." He leaned back in his chair, his tone as cool and detached as if he were closing a business deal. "With me, she'll have the best schools, the best opportunities, the best future. What can she have with you? A divorced housewife? What can you possibly do?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the man in front of me. 10 years of marriage had flecked his temples with gray. I used to be the one who plucked them out for him. He always kept a tin of Altoids in his suit pocket because I once told him I didn't like his breath. I couldn't remember when he'd changed his phone's wallpaper from my photo to his company's logo. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked on. The plate of osso buco was growing cold, a thin film of fat beginning to congeal on the surface. "Jenna's pregnant," Daniel said, as if finally delivering the concluding line of a prepared statement. 3 months. "Jenna Stevens? Your assistant?" He nodded curtly. I gave a slight nod of my own, as if hearing a piece of news that no longer concerned me. I picked up the pen. "You've thought this through?" He seemed momentarily taken aback, perhaps not expecting me to be so decisive. "I've thought it through very carefully." I signed my name. The moment the nib of the pen touched the paper, I felt a sudden lightness. Not the relief of pain ending, but the feeling of a crushing weight, carried for far too long, finally being lifted from my shoulders. I pushed the signed agreement back across the table to him and stood up. "But you're wrong about one thing." Daniel took the documents, looking up at me. "My daughter is not an asset you get to keep." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady and clear. "As for custody, I'll see you in court." "With what? What will you fight me with?" He placed the documents into his briefcase, his tone still wrapped in that familiar, condescending superiority. "Can you even afford a lawyer?" I didn't reply. To argue with such words would only be to lower myself. I turned and walked straight up the stairs. 20 minutes later, I came down with a single suitcase. A few sets of clothes, a photo album, and a small painting Lily had made in kindergarten. 10 years of marriage, packed into a 20-inch carry-on that wasn't even full. When I reached the living room, Daniel was gone. The dishes were still on the table, the osso buco untouched. I pulled my suitcase to the door and bent down to change my shoes. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. "Miss Lynn. Atlas Corp just moved up the signing. It's now ahead of our scheduled close." My own voice, when it emerged, was completely different. It was not the voice of the woman who had just spent 3 hours braising meat in a kitchen. They moved the time, we set the price. Send the revised proposal to my email. Yes, ma'am. Also, the Q3 report from North Star is ready. We'll discuss it at the office tomorrow. I hung up and opened the door. A discreet black sedan was waiting at the curb. It was understated, but one glance at its sleek lines told you it was no ordinary vehicle, a model so rare there were only a handful in the entire country. The driver's side door opened, and a man in his early 30s with gold-rimmed glasses hurried over, taking the suitcase from my hand. Miss Lynn. He opened the rear door for me. We've been waiting. I ducked into the car. In the rearview mirror, the grand iron gates of the Thorn estate slowly closed. The garden lights were on, the automated sprinklers still misting the perfectly manicured lawn. The white roses I'd planted myself were in full bloom, untrimmed, their branches reaching out in a state of beautiful chaos. I turned my gaze forward. Alex! The residence on Sterling Place first. Your penthouse? Yes. Alex glanced at me in the rearview mirror, a faint smile playing on his lips. 10 years. You finally decided to walk out. I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes. It's not that I saw the light. I paused, then continued. It's that I'm done with the play. My phone vibrated again. A text message from Daniel. It was short. Don't leave anything behind. It'll be a hassle if you have to come back for it. I stared at it for exactly 2 seconds before deleting the entire conversation thread. I opened another app. A heavily encrypted enterprise management system. The interface displayed a single line, North Star Capital, Founders Private Channel, pending tasks, 47. I scrolled through them one by one, my finger stopped on the last item. A system notification, Thorn Enterprises, Q3, financing extension, awaiting approval, Thorn Enterprises. My ex-husband's company. The lifeblood of the entire Thorn family. And the person who decided whether to keep funding it was me. I hadn't been back to the Sterling Place apartment in 5 years. Alex swiped a keycard, and the private elevator ascended directly to the top floor. As the doors opened, the faint, clean scent of sandalwood drifted out. The automated fragrance system was still working perfectly. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, half the city lay glittering below. A sea of lights stretching to the horizon. The view from here was much higher than from the Thorn mansion. I slipped off my shoes and sank onto the sofa. I had bought this apartment 6 years ago, without telling a soul. The decor was minimalist, a palette of gray and white, with very little furniture. The most eye-catching object in the living room was a framed painting on the wall, a drawing Lily had made when she was 4. 3 lopsided stick figures representing me, her, and a golden retriever we never had. Lily had always wanted a dog, but my mother-in-law had decreed that the Thorn family did not keep such animals. Alex set my suitcase down and retrieved 2 bottles of water from the fridge, handing one to me. Are you hungry? The ramen place downstairs is still open. Not hungry. Let's get to work. Alex sat opposite me, opening his tablet. Let's start with the projects you wanted me to monitor. Thorn Enterprises first. He slid the device across the table to me. To put it mildly, their financial situation is precariously balanced. To be blunt, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. The Hudson Point development project went so far over budget last year it left a financial black hole of nearly $90 million. Our fund, North Star, is currently their largest single creditor, accounting for 40% of their external financing. I swiped to the next page. The second largest, Keystone Holdings. That's Victor Thorn's money. Victor Thorn, Daniel's paternal uncle, and the second largest shareholder in Thorn Enterprises. I remembered him. At every Christmas dinner, he always sat at the head of the table. His smile warm and gentle. He was always generous with Lily's gifts. But the way he looked at Daniel never felt like family. It was too polite. And in our world, excessive politeness is often a mask for calculation. Any recent moves from him? Yes. Alex switched to another screen. He's been in contact with several of the smaller shareholders. My guess is he's waiting for an opportunity. I said nothing, simply closing the tablet. Alex watched me for a moment before speaking. Miss Lynn, there's something I've wanted to say for the last 10 years. Go on. Back then, when you insisted on marrying Daniel Thorn, I and the other founding partners tried to talk you out of it. North Star was just getting off the ground. You were the core. The moment you stepped back, we almost didn't make it. He paused. For 10 years, you've been living in that house like a maid. I've been out here, holding the fort for you. But honestly, he stopped. I still don't understand. I turned to look out the window. 10 years ago, I was 28. North Star Capital had just completed its first major acquisition, and the entire financial world was speculating about who was behind the firm. Everyone assumed it was some seasoned, older man, a ruthless veteran of Wall Street. No one suspected it was a 8-year-old woman. The annual New York Commerce Association charity gala. One of the co-sponsors is a foundation we fund. Alex looked at me. The invitation was sent in the name of the founder of North Star. I was planning to attend in your place. No need. I closed the tablet, my voice quiet but firm. I'll go myself. Alex gave me a long look. He knew exactly what that meant. I will appear as my true self. Are you sure? He asked. Once you show up, all of New York will know who you are. I took a sip of water. A slight smile touching my lips. Then let them know. I picked up my phone. A new social media post had just appeared. It was from Jenna Stevens. In the photo, she had her arm linked through Daniel's, standing right in the middle of the Thorn living room. The sofa I had chosen, the floor lamp I had bought, every single item in the frame was my decision, and now it was all just a backdrop for her triumphant display. The caption was a single sentence. The rest of my life is you. Below, a flood of congratulatory comments. Margaret Thorn had even personally liked the post. I stared at the picture for a few seconds. I didn't feel sad, just a profound sense of absurdity. Some people walk into a house and immediately think they're the owner, not realizing that the prize they're clinging to might not be a trophy, but a mountain of debt wrapped in a glamorous facade. I closed the app and opened my notes, typing 3 lines for myself. Deny financing extension. Attend charity gala. Bring Lily home. After I finished, I turned off the lights. The living room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the glass. I lay down on the sofa, not bothering with the bedroom. My phone screen lit up again. It was a message from Lily. A short voice memo. I pressed play. Her small, innocent voice filled the silence. Mommy, when are you coming home? Grandma said you're on a business trip. I got a 100 on my math test today. The teacher said you need to sign it. It was only 8 seconds long. I placed the phone on my chest, staring at the ceiling for a long time before slowly closing my eyes. Mommy's coming to get you soon. The annual New York Commerce Association charity gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Carlyle Hotel. The guest list was a who's who of the city's financial elite. Daniel Thorn attended every year, but this time, he had someone new by his side. Jenna Stevens, in a pale pink gown, clung to his arm as they entered. She had clearly chosen the color to emphasize her youth, making her look like a freshly bloomed flower. Margaret Thorn walked beside them, a perfectly composed smile on her face. Whenever she met an acquaintance, she would make the introduction, "This is Jenna, Daniel's new." The expressions of those around them shifted subtly, but on the surface, everyone offered polite congratulations. In these circles, everyone understood the importance of maintaining appearances. Only Daniel seemed ill at ease. It had been only 4 days since he'd signed the divorce papers, and now he was parading his new girlfriend around. The gossip would be merciless. But Margaret had been insistent. The more you hide, the more people will think something is wrong. Walk in with your head held high. What is there to be afraid of? The ballroom was a picture of opulent elegance. Just as Jenna was lifting her phone to find the perfect angle for a photo, A hush fell over the entrance. Not a forced silence, but a natural pause in the crowd's chatter as someone new arrived. Jenna turned to look. A woman was walking in. She wore a simple black evening gown, its design understated but so impeccably tailored it seemed molded to her. Her hair was swept into a neat chignon, her jewelry minimal, just a pair of pearl earrings that perfectly accentuated her poise. Jenna recognized me. Her expression froze, her hand unconsciously tightening on Daniel's sleeve. "What is she doing here?" Daniel had seen me too. He scowled. An invitation to an event of this caliber wasn't something you could just acquire. In the past, I had always appeared by his side as Mrs. Thorn. Now we were divorced. So how had I gotten in? He started to move forward, but was intercepted by Mr. Davison, the executive vice chairman of the association. He was a man in his 60s, a titan in the New York business world, but right now, his attention wasn't on Daniel. He walked straight past him, directly to me. "Miss Lynn!" He grasped my hand with both of his enthusiasm far exceeding typical social pleasantries. "We've finally managed to get you here." Daniel stood frozen. "Miss Lynn?" The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted instantly. It wasn't because I was so beautiful I commanded attention, but because, right behind Mr. Davison, 3 or 4 more prominent figures approached, all heavyweights of the New York financial scene. Each was more deferential than the last. "I can't believe Miss Lynn graced us with her presence tonight. This is truly an honor for all of us. My apologies for not greeting you sooner." Whispers spread through the hall like wildfire. "Is that someone from North Star?" Quiet. No wonder Davison rushed over like that. Jenna had no idea what was happening. She tugged at Daniel's sleeve, whispering, "What's North Star?" He didn't answer. In his mind, the scattered puzzle pieces were violently snapping into place. North Star Capital, one of the largest private equity firms in New York, with controlling stakes in dozens of companies, including the life-or-death financing for Thorn Enterprises. It wasn't that Daniel had never dealt with North Star, but the person he had always dealt with was Alex Chen, North Star's CEO. He had always assumed Alex was the one pulling the strings. But now, Mr. Davison was calling me Miss Lynn. These titans of industry were surrounding me, and Alex Chen. Alex was here too. He was standing half a step behind me, a position that clearly delineated his role. It was not the place of an equal, but of a subordinate. Margaret pushed her way to the front, her composure finally cracking. "What is going on? Why is she here? Who invited her?" Daniel didn't answer. He just stood there, watching as I was personally escorted by a crowd of admirers to the head table. His own table, with his mother and Jenna, was table number 3. The gala officially began. As was customary, companies announced their charitable donations. Thorn Enterprises donated $150,000. It wasn't a lot, but it wasn't a little. It was the same amount every year. Daniel went on stage, said a few perfunctory words, and returned to a polite, lukewarm round of applause. Immediately after, the MC read the next name. North Star Capital, with a donation of $2 million. A beat of stunned silence filled the hall, followed by a thunderous wave of applause that completely overwhelmed the room. $2 million. More than 10 times what Thorn Enterprises had donated. The wineglass in Margaret's hand nearly slipped. Jenna's face was a rigid mask. I was invited to the stage. Standing under the spotlights, I was a world away from the woman in an apron who had been serving dinner just a few days ago. North Star has always been committed to supporting education and healthcare initiatives in New York. I began, my voice calm and steady. This donation will go toward a new scholarship program for underprivileged students. From the audience, a well-known real estate developer raised his glass. "Miss Lynn, I've long admired your work. We'd always heard of the mysterious Mr. Lynn of North Star, but I never imagined it would be such an elegant lady." I smiled faintly. People got used to calling me Mr., and I never bothered to correct them. A ripple of light laughter went through the room. easing the tension. But no one dared to underestimate me because of it. Daniel sat at the third table, his face having lost all its initial composure. The man next to him, another developer, leaned over and whispered, "Mr. Thorn, isn't that North Star executive your ex-wife?" "I don't know her," Daniel snapped, downing his drink in one gulp. The man smirked. "She looks awfully familiar." Halfway through the dinner, I went to the restroom. When I came out, someone was waiting in the corridor. Daniel. He was leaning against the wall. His tie loosened, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. "You're with North Star." I stopped, looking at him. "Not with North Star," I corrected him gently. "North Star is mine." His hand tightened around the glass, so hard that condensation dripped down between his fingers. "That's impossible." He stared at me, his voice stripped of its certainty. "For 10 years. You've been at home, cooking, and raising our child. And a woman who cooks and raises a child can't run a company?" I tilted my head. "You work 8 hours a day." After I finished the housework, I still had 6 hours left. For me, that was enough. He was speechless. I walked past him, then paused. "Oh, right." I turned back. "Regarding North Star's financing, I'm sure you've received the notice by now." The color drained from Daniel's face. He had. That very afternoon, North Star had sent a formal notice of non-renewal, effectively pulling their funding. "Are you mixing personal matters with business?" he accused. "It's not personal." I looked him dead in the eye, my voice so calm it gave him nothing to latch onto. "It's because your financial reports have problems. The deficit from the Hudson Point project is significantly larger than the figures you reported to us. As an investor, cutting our losses is simply instinct." With that, I turned and walked back to the ballroom without a second glance. Daniel remained in the corridor, frozen, the whiskey tilted, spilling over his expensive Italian shoes. And he didn't even notice. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need you to look into the ownership structure of North Star Capital. Everything. I want to know who is behind the shell corporations." The person on the other end responded quickly. But when Daniel hung up, his hand was still shaking. It wasn't exactly fear. It was the dizzying sensation of having been blind for 10 years, of only now realizing it. He wanted to be furious, but he couldn't. He wanted to laugh, but he couldn't do that either. The news that North Star was pulling its funding couldn't be contained. The next morning, Thorn Enterprises stock plummeted the moment the market opened. Daniel arrived at the office early. His desk was piled high with funding requests from every department. The Hudson Point construction site couldn't halt. Payments to suppliers couldn't be delayed, and the interest on their bank loans was due. His CFO stood before him, his face pale. "Mr. Thorn, if North Star's credit line isn't renewed by the end of the month, our cash flow—" "I know. And there's more," the CFO said, swallowing hard. "Last night, 2 more of our smaller creditors sent termination notices. I'm afraid they saw North Star pulling out and decided to follow suit." Daniel slammed his pen on the desk. He'd had his people digging all night. North Star Capital's registration was a labyrinth of nested entities, leading back to an offshore corporation that was impossible to trace to a beneficial owner. But the deference of the powerful figures at the gala had said it all. His ex-wife, the woman he thought knew only of recipes and school schedules, was the one holding his company's fate in her hands. And he was the one who had pushed her out the door. His desk phone rang. It was Margaret. "Daniel, what is happening to the stock price? Your cousin just called me, asking." "Mom, not now. I'm busy. Is this Evelyn's doing? I told you that woman wasn't simple." "Mom!" Daniel's voice shot up, sharp and strained. The other end went silent for a few seconds, then the line clicked dead. At 3 p.m., his office door opened. It was Victor Thorn. The man, in his late 50s, had his hair neatly combed and was wearing a dark blue cashmere sweater. He looked more like a tenured professor than a seasoned businessman. He was carrying a gift basket of fruit. "Busy, nephew?" he asked, with a smile. Daniel leaned back, eyeing him. "What can I do for you, Uncle Victor?" Victor placed the basket on the coffee table and took a seat, his eyes casually scanning the office. "I heard North Star pulled out." "No, Mern. News travels fast. I'm handling it. Need any help?" Victor's smile was placid. Keystone still has some liquidity. Moving a few dozen million over wouldn't be a problem. Daniel didn't respond. Victor looked at him, his smile fading slightly. "What's the matter? No need to be so guarded with your own uncle." "Uncle," Daniel said, looking him straight in the eye. "If you help, what are your terms?" The smile vanished from Victor's face, though his warm demeanor remained. "Terms? What is there to talk about? We're all family." He spoke slowly. "But Daniel, let's be honest. You've gotten yourself into a real mess this time. The Hudson Point project? I told you from the start it was a bad idea, but you charged ahead anyway. Now that North Star is out, the hole is exposed for everyone to see." Daniel didn't argue. It was the truth. Victor's voice grew even more paternal. "My point is, it's too much for you to carry alone. Perhaps the company's management structure needs an adjustment. Bring in a few more experienced hands to share the burden. Bring in more people. His people." The implication was clear. Daniel's fingers tightened around his pen, the cap clicking under the pressure. "Uncle, let me think about it. Don't think too long." Victor stood up, patting him on the shoulder. "The market doesn't wait for anyone." He left. The moment the door closed, Daniel threw the pen into its holder. He was being squeezed from both sides. North Star was cutting him off from the outside, while Victor was undermining him from within. He wasn't sure if the two were connected. But he knew one thing for certain. If he couldn't solve this money problem by the end of the month, he would lose control of Thorn Enterprises. That evening, Daniel's car pulled up in front of a residential tower on Sterling Place. He had found the address, an asset registered under my name, a penthouse on the top floor. Market value, over $20 million. The moment he saw that number, his mind went blank. When they married, I had told him I had no savings. He called 3 times before I answered. "What is it?" "I'm downstairs." A few seconds of silence. "Come up. 67th floor." He took the elevator. The doors opened. I was wearing a loose cashmere sweater, my hair casually tied back, a pen still in my hand. I had clearly just looked up from some documents. The living room was vast, nearly twice the size of the one in the Thorn mansion. "Have a seat," I said, gesturing to the sofa. He didn't sit. He just stood in the middle of the room, looking around as if searching for something familiar in the alien space. "When did you buy this place?" 6 years ago. 6 years ago. The 4th year of our marriage. Lily had just started preschool. Every day, I was dropping her off and picking her up. Grocery shopping, cooking, making tea for his mother, managing every detail of the household flawlessly. And at the same time, I owned this penthouse. "You lied to me for 10 years. "I didn't lie to you." I put down my pen and looked up at him. "You never asked." The words struck him dumb. It was true. He had never asked if I had my own career, my own money, or a world that existed beyond the kitchen and the nursery. In his eyes, I was just the woman who stayed home, took care of the house and the child, and kept his life comfortable and stable. "I'm not here to argue," he said, taking a deep breath, forcing his voice back to normal. "Can the North Star financing be renewed?" I leaned back into the sofa, looking up at him, my tone level. "Give me a reason." "If Thorn Enterprises collapses, thousands of employees will lose their jobs." "Good." I met his gaze. "Then this is a business negotiation, not a marital one." He was silent for a moment. "Fine. If this is business, we'll play by business rules." I picked up a file from the coffee table and handed it to him. These are North Star's terms for renewal. Daniel looked down. As he scanned the first page, his expression changed dramatically. The terms were simple. There were only two. First, the management of Thorn Enterprises must accept a new chief financial officer appointed by North Star. This CFO would have veto power over all major financial decisions. Second, full and sole custody of Lily Thorn goes to me. You're blackmailing me. You don't have to sign. I lifted my teacup, taking a sip, my voice calm. You could go to your uncle, but I suspect his terms will be even harder to swallow than mine. His hand holding the document clenched, his knuckles turning white. I need to think about it. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow. I stood up and walked to the door, holding it open for him. After that, this offer is void. He left with the file in his hand. As the door closed, I returned to the sofa and let out a soft breath. My own hands were trembling. I opened my phone. Lily hadn't sent a voice message today. I called her. It rang over 10 times before someone picked up. I called again. Finally, on the third try, the call connected. It was the Thorn family's housekeeper. Miss Lynn. Lily's asleep. How was she today? She was fine, but what? The housekeeper's voice dropped. The school called today. They said Lily got into a fight with another student. Mrs. Thorn was furious. Lily barely ate any dinner tonight. My hand tightened around the phone. Why did they fight? I heard the other child said some unkind things. I don't know the details. I closed my eyes. A heavy weight settling in my chest. Thank you. Please keep an eye on her for me. I hung up and sat in the silent living room for a long time. Outside the window, the city blazed as bright as day. I owned a penthouse on the top floor, a multi-billion-dollar company, and had half of New York's elite addressing me with deference. But my daughter was still in that house, having gone to bed hungry and alone. The next morning, I received a call from the school. Hello. This is Lily Thorn's school. Regarding the incident yesterday, we would like for both families to come in and discuss the matter. I'll be there. And you are? I'm her mother. I hung up and had Alex drive me straight to the school. When I arrived, the other parents were already there, a well-dressed couple who sat with an air that screamed, "My child is the victim here." Lily's homeroom teacher stood between them, trying to keep the peace. But the tension was thick. I pushed the door open. Miss Lynn? Lily's mother? The teacher stood up immediately. Yes, the woman across the room looked me up and down, her judgmental gaze unconcealed. Her first words were sharp. So you're Lily's mother? Yesterday your daughter attacked my son. She scratched his face. Where is Lily? I ignored her, looking at the teacher. She's in the classroom next door. I'd like to see her first. The teacher led me to the adjoining room. The moment the door opened, I saw Lily. She was sitting by herself in the back row, a small 8-year-old in a neat school uniform, her head bowed, her little legs dangling above the floor. Hearing the door, she looked up. The instant she saw me, her lips pressed into a tight line and her eyes reddened, but she fought back tears. I walked over and knelt in front of her. Let me see your hands. Lily obediently held them out. One of her fingernails was broken, and there was a scrape on her thumb. I took a Band-Aid from my purse, something I always carried, and carefully applied it. Does it hurt? She shook her head. Why did you fight? Lily didn't answer. Lily? She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. He said Dad threw you out. I waited, listening. He said you were abandoned. I told him it wasn't true, that you were on a business trip, but he said I was a liar. My hand faltered for a second. I looked at her, my voice softening, but each word was firm. And then what happened? Then I hit him. Lily looked up at me, a tiny but clear spark of defiance in her eyes. Mommy, I'm not a liar. You are on a business trip, right? That's what Grandma said. I opened my mouth, but for a moment, I couldn't find the words. I reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, my voice returning to its usual calm. I'll handle this. You wait here for me. I stood up and returned to the conference room. The other parent was still talking. We demand a formal apology. And do you know what your son said? I stood in the doorway, my voice low but sharp enough to silence the room. The father immediately became defensive. Kids say things. It's unavoidable. The point is, your daughter was the one who got physical. An 8-year-old telling another child she's been abandoned. In front of the entire class. I walked in and sat down opposite them. You call that kids saying things? The mother's expression shifted, and she tugged at her husband's arm. We can discuss an apology, I said, looking them both in the eye, my voice calm and articulate. But you owe my daughter an apology as well. Verbal violence is still violence. I spoke evenly, enunciating every word. I can teach my daughter not to use her hands next time, but you should teach your son how to use his words. That shouldn't be too difficult, should it? They looked at each other, speechless. The teacher, seeing an opportunity, quickly stepped in to mediate. In the end, apologies were exchanged, and the matter was closed. I led Lily out of the school. The car was waiting at the gate. Lily hesitated, not recognizing it. Get in, I said, opening the back door. She climbed in obediently, her small hand curiously touching the leather seat. Mommy, whose car is this? It's mine. Wow. Her eyes lit up for a moment, then dimmed. Mommy, are you not with Daddy anymore? I leaned over and fastened her seatbelt. That's right. Why? I thought for a moment. Because sometimes grown-ups end up on two different paths. And just because they aren't on the same path anymore doesn't mean one was right and one was wrong. What about me? I looked at her. You will always be mine. Lily tilted her head, thinking, then asked, Can I go with you? A lump formed in my throat. I reached out and caressed her face. Yes. I took out my phone and sent a text to Daniel. Lily is with me. I won't bring her back until you come to get her. Also, your deadline is 5 p.m. today. After sending it, I put my phone away and pulled my daughter into my arms. A little while later, Lily leaned against me, her voice very quiet. Mommy, that lady isn't nice to me. My whole body went rigid. Which lady? The one Daddy brought home. Lily whispered. Her smile is fake. I can tell. The other day she poured me a glass of water, and she made it extra hot on purpose. My hands clenched into fists. Alex, watching me in the rearview mirror, saw my expression change. My face was still calm, but my eyes had gone cold as ice. Turn the car around, I said. We're going to the Thorn residence. Alex didn't ask a single question. He immediately executed a U-turn. No more waiting. Certainly not until 5 p.m. Some matters, when left to fester, only encourage others to overstep their bounds. The housekeeper opened the door to the Thorn mansion. I walked in, holding Lily's hand. 3 people were in the living room. Daniel, Margaret, and Jenna Stevens. It looked like a family meeting was in session. Seeing me, all 3 reacted differently. Daniel shot to his feet. Margaret's face darkened. Jenna, still holding a teacup, flinched, her fingers tightening around the porcelain. Why are you here without calling? Margaret demanded. I ignored her. I knelt down to Lily's level, my voice low. Go upstairs and pack whatever you want to bring with you. What is the meaning of this? Margaret stood up abruptly. Mom let her pack. Daniel interjected, then looked at me. Are you here to talk about the terms? I stood and faced him directly. I'm here to pick up my daughter. You saw the contract. It's now 3 o'clock. I glanced at the wall clock. 2 hours until your deadline. Sign it, or don't. Give me a final answer. Jenna, sitting beside him, finally couldn't stay silent. She placed her teacup down, stood, and walked to Daniel's side, linking her arm through his. Daniel, she's threatening you. Miss Stevens. I looked at her. Just those 2 words were enough to make her freeze. You're 3 months pregnant, correct? 7 bestride, volley. Jenna instinctively placed a hand on her stomach. Yes. So what? I'm sure you've had a checkup. I took a file from my bag and placed it on the coffee table. This is a record request from the top 3 hospitals in New York City. Your name, social security number, and appointment history are all here. The color began to drain from Jenna's face. The results are quite interesting, I said, opening the file. In the past 6 months, you haven't had a single prenatal visit at any of these hospitals. There isn't even a record of you scheduling an appointment. I go to a private clinic. Which one? I can't remember the name right now. You can't remember? I looked up at her. Margaret cut in, unable to restrain herself. Where she gets her checkups is none of your business. Then what about this? I pulled another paper from the file. It was a pharmacy receipt. 2 months ago, Jenna Stevens purchased a home pregnancy test and a vial of injectable HCG from a pharmacy downtown. I pushed the receipt towards Daniel. After an injection of this hormone, a pregnancy test can produce a false positive. I don't think I need to explain that any further. The living room fell silent. It was the crushing silence of people being confronted with an undeniable, ugly truth. Jenna was ghostly pale, her hand falling away from Daniel's arm. She took a step back. Daniel, let me explain. Explain what? Daniel stared at the receipt, reading it over and over as if he couldn't believe it. I really do love you, Jenna pleaded. I was afraid you wouldn't divorce her, so You lied, his voice was hoarse. From the very beginning, you lied. No, Jenna panicked, grabbing his hand. My feelings for you are real. Daniel ripped his hand away. Get out, Jenna froze, her lips trembling, unable to form another word. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of panic, resentment, and the raw humiliation of someone who had been utterly exposed. Finally, she grabbed her purse and fled, her high heels clacking frantically against the marble floor before the front door slammed shut. Only the 3 of us remained. Margaret sank onto the sofa, speechless. Daniel stood motionless, as if something vital had been ripped out of him. She wasn't really pregnant, he murmured, as if to himself. No, I closed the file. So I divorced you for... He trailed off. I didn't finish his sentence. The answer was already hanging, heavy and suffocating, in the air. He had served me divorce papers because of a phantom pregnancy. That absurdity, in itself, was a steep price to pay. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Lily came down, wearing her small backpack, a few outfits, and a stuffed rabbit tucked inside. Mummy, I'm ready. I held out my hand. She came over and took it. About the contract, I said from the doorway, turning back to look at Daniel. It's your decision. I didn't mention the 5 p.m. deadline again. I knew. From this moment on, he had no leverage left to bargain with. Outside, Alex was leaning against the car. Seeing Lily, he crouched down and smiled. You must be Lily, right? Your mom talks about you all the time. Lily hid behind me, peeking out at him. Uncle Alex is a good guy, I said. She hesitated for a moment, then held out her hand to shake his. Let's go. My phone rang. It wasn't Daniel. It was an unknown number, I answered. A deep, slow male voice came through the line. Miss Lynn, my name is Victor Thorn. I was hoping we could meet. He chose the location. A private lounge in a restored historic building downtown. From the outside, it was unassuming, but the interior was a masterpiece of quiet luxury. I took Lily back to my apartment first, leaving her with Alex, then went to the appointment alone. When I pushed open the door to the private room, Victor Thorn was already waiting. A pot of tea steamed gently on the table between us. Seeing me, he stood up, his demeanor as gracious and warm as ever. Miss Lynn, please, have a seat. I sat. He poured a cup of tea and pushed it towards me. Have some tea, It's the first harvest of the season. The best. I didn't touch it. He didn't seem to mind, taking a sip himself before setting his cup down. You're younger than I imagined. Let's get straight to the point, Mr. Thorn. Victor chuckled. Direct. I like that. Very well. He looked at me, his tone casual. North Star's decision to pull funding. Was that your decision? Or did someone put you up to it? I run my business, Mr. Thorn. No one puts me up to anything. Excellent. He nodded. I was just concerned you were being used without realizing it. I looked at him. And who do you think is using me? Oh, no one in particular, he said with a faint smile. Just a general concern. After all, even though you and Daniel are divorced, Lily still carries the Thorn name. If something were to happen to the company, it wouldn't be good for her either. After all that circling, he was still using a child as a shield. I placed my hands on the table, looking him straight in the eye. So what is it you want to say? The smile on his face faded. He set down his teacup, lacing his fingers together. His voice dropped. I hope North Star will consider a partnership with Keystone. We can take over Thorn Enterprises together. Daniel's capabilities are limited. He can't handle the mess at the Hudson Point project. Rather than let him drag the entire company down, it would be better to let someone more competent take the reins. Someone competent, meaning you. I've been with Thorn Enterprises for 30 years, he said, leaning back. When my brother was alive, I built half of this company's business from the ground up. And what was the result? After he passed, he left everything to Daniel, simply because he was the eldest son. His voice was steady, but his eyes couldn't hide the ambition that had been simmering for years. You were in that family for 10 years. He looked at me. No one knows better than you. Daniel is not cut out to lead this company. I didn't reply. Victor waited a moment, then continued. The terms of our partnership are negotiable. Your North Star provides the capital. My Keystone handles the operations. I'll deal with the internal politics. Once Thorn Enterprises is stable, North Star will be guaranteed a minimum annual return. Jenna Stevens was your plant, I said, cutting him off. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I took out my tablet, opened a file, and placed it on the table. Jenna Stevens, 28 years old, hired by Thorn Enterprises 3 years ago. Her reference was a Mr. Robert Miller, the HR director at Keystone Holdings, and Mr. Miller works for you. Victor's expression didn't change, but his hand paused for a fraction of a second as he was reaching for the teapot. Jenna's ex-boyfriend, a man named Mark Peterson, is a project manager at a Keystone subsidiary. They broke up 2 years ago, or more accurately, you forced them to break up and then placed her in Thorn Enterprises as a secretary to get close to Daniel. I turned the tablet, so the screen faced him. Here are the bank records. Over the past 2 years, Jenna Stevens' account has received over $300,000 in transfers from accounts linked to Keystone. That's a bit high for a secretary's salary. The smile finally vanished from Victor Thorn's face. You investigated me. You planted someone next to my ex-husband, destroyed my family, and caused my daughter to be taunted at school. I looked at him, my voice low but each word heavy. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate you? The room fell silent. From an adjacent suite, the faint sound of a jazz piano drifted in, each note soft, but doing nothing to ease the tension in our room. Victor was quiet for a long time. Then he laughed. It wasn't his warm, gentle laugh from before. It was the laugh of a man who had decided to show his cards. Well done, you're good. He lifted his teacup and took a drink. But you know, none of this matters. Why? Because Daniel will never believe you. Because he hates you. Victor set the cup down, looking at me as if I were a talented but naive student who still had one last lesson to learn. You hid from him for 10 years. In his eyes, you deceived him. He might work with me, but he will never work with you. He smirked. That's just how men are, Miss Lynn. You may be a brilliant businesswoman, but you don't understand men. I didn't argue. Because on that point, he was half right. Daniel did resent me. Not because I had money, but because the truth of it made him look like a fool. For 10 years, he had seen himself as the provider, the protector, the one who handled everything. And the reality? The wife he thought was only good for running a household was 100 times wealthier than he was. And he never had a clue. That wasn't a feeling that inspired gratitude. It inspired humiliation. So what? I stood up. Victor stood as well. So you should think carefully, he said. If you help Daniel, he won't thank you for it. If you don't help him, he collapses. And Lily still carries the Thorn name. Even if you win custody, the baggage of the Thorn family will follow her for the rest of her life. He walked to the door, then paused and turned back to me. The shareholders' meeting is in 3 days. You should decide which side you're really on. The door closed, leaving me alone in the room. The tea on the table was cold. I took out my phone and made a call. Alex, it's me. That contingency plan I had you prepare. Plan B. Is it ready? It's been ready for a long time, Alex replied instantly. Just waiting for you to give the word. Execute it at the shareholders' meeting. Understood? Understood. He paused. Oh, one more thing. What is it? Daniel Thorn signed the agreement. I froze. What did he sign? Your renewal terms. He just faxed it over. Fully executed. Both clauses. I was silent for a beat. The custody clause too? That too. Alex's voice grew more subdued. He also wrote something in the blank space at the bottom. What did he write? He wrote, I'm sorry. Please take care of Lily. I stood there, holding the phone, and slowly sat back down. Outside, a bicycle bell chimed twice. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. 10 years. I had waited 10 years for those 3 words, but today, I no longer needed them. What I needed now wasn't an apology. What I needed was to end this entire saga, once and for all. At the shareholders' meeting in 3 days. The shareholders' meeting for Thorn Enterprises was held in the 32nd floor boardroom of their corporate headquarters. In addition to the shareholders, 2 financial journalists had been invited to attend a leak deliberately orchestrated by Victor Thorn. He wanted a public, formal transfer of power, so everyone would see him take the throne legitimately. Victor arrived early. He sat at one end of the long conference table, 3 neat stacks of documents before him. Flanking him was his personal legal team, 4 lawyers in sharp suits, their presence alone creating an intimidating atmosphere. Daniel sat at the other end. He looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes obvious, but he held his back straight. His team consisted of just 2 people, his CFO and the head of his legal department. The disparity in numbers made it clear he was outgunned from the start. The meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp. The opening proceedings were swift. The auditor's report, the financial status update, the progress report on the Hudson Point project. Each segment was presented by one of Victor's people. The numbers were grim, but their delivery was unnervingly calm, as if they weren't presenting a report, but reading a pre-written verdict. Finally, Victor spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, you've all seen the situation. Thorn Enterprises' financial health is no longer stable. The Hudson Point project has severe cost overruns, and our external financing is in jeopardy. As the second-largest shareholder, I am forced to propose a restructuring of the management board. As he finished, the smaller shareholders exchanged glances. A few were already nodding. Victor produced another document. This is my proposed plan for the board adjustment. The core of it is the establishment of a new executive committee. With myself as chairman, Daniel will retain his title as chairman of the board, but actual executive power. Excuse me. The boardroom doors were pushed open. Everyone turned. I walked in. I was wearing a dark gray pantsuit, with minimal makeup and my hair tied back in a low ponytail. In my hand was a leather-bound portfolio. Behind me were Alex and 3 others. 2 were clearly lawyers, and the third carried a heavy briefcase, his stride purposeful. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. A small shareholder whispered, "Who is that?" Victor recognized me. His eyes narrowed, but he maintained his composure. "Miss Lynn, this is a private shareholders meeting. You are—" "I'm a shareholder." He froze. I walked straight to the head of the table and opened my portfolio, handing a set of documents to the board secretary. The secretary took them, and his face paled as he read the first page. He looked from Daniel to Victor, then cleared his throat and began to read aloud. "This is a certification of share ownership in Thorn Enterprises, held by North Star Capital and its affiliated entities." He paused, as if he couldn't believe the words himself. "The total share percentage." He looked down at the number again. "Is 31.7%. The room erupted in a storm of whispers. In the current ownership structure, Daniel held 28%, and Victor held 22%. The rest was scattered among smaller investors. But now, North Star, meaning me, held 31.7%. I was the largest shareholder. Victor's composure finally shattered. "That's impossible!" He shot up from his chair, snatching the documents to see for himself. "Where did these shares come from?" "Over the past 8 years, Alex said, stepping forward and placing a detailed transaction list on the table. North Star has, through 12 affiliated accounts, been steadily acquiring shares on the secondary market and through private transfers. Every transaction is documented and fully compliant with SEC regulations." Victor flipped frantically through the pages, his finger stopping on one. He looked up at me. "You've been playing a very long game." "I wasn't playing a game." I sat down in the now vacant chairman's seat at the head of the table. "I was protecting my house." I raised my eyes, my voice quiet but commanding enough to silence the room. "This company bears my daughter's name. I will not let it fall into unworthy hands." As I said it, I glanced across the table. Not at Victor, but at Daniel. He hadn't said a word since I entered, just stared at the share certificate in front of him, the numbers stark and undeniable. His ex-wife, the woman he had dismissed, the woman he believed knew nothing beyond her domestic sphere, had, for 8 years, without his knowledge, secretly become the majority owner of his company. "I've been protecting Thorn Enterprises for a long time," I continued. "Since the 2nd year of our marriage. Every time this company faced a financial crisis in the past decade, a silent, anonymous investor stepped in to shore it up. He had always thought it was luck, or the market recognizing his talent. It wasn't. It was me. It had always been me, Mr. Thorn," I said, turning to Victor. "Regarding your restructuring proposal, as the majority shareholder, I vote no." His lawyer started to speak, but Victor raised a hand to silence him. "Furthermore," I said, turning to the last page of my portfolio, "regarding your arrangement to place Miss Jenna Stevens within this company, your interference in internal HR, and the funneling of company benefits to employees through accounts linked to Keystone Holdings, I have submitted all the evidence to the relevant regulatory authorities." The room was dead silent. Even the scratching of the journalists' pens seemed deafeningly loud. Victor looked at me, his lips moving slightly. Perhaps he wanted to threaten, or deny, or defend himself. But in the end, he said nothing, because he had just seen the 2 men standing behind me, not my lawyers, but federal agents. "Mr. Victor Thorn, please come with us." Victor stood. He straightened his jacket, picked up the teacup from the table, and drank the last of it. Then he looked at me. "Miss Lynn, you win." With that, he turned and walked out. The boardroom door closed, and the atmosphere instantly changed. The small shareholders began talking in hushed, excited tones. The 2 journalists were writing furiously. They had their headline. I stood up and closed my portfolio. "This meeting is adjourned. At our next meeting, I and the board will present a new operational plan. Any further inquiries can be directed to North Star's legal team." I turned to leave. As I reached the door, a low, hoarse voice called out from behind me. Evelyn! It was Daniel. I stopped, but didn't turn around. Thank you, he said, his voice raw. I stood motionless for a second before replying, my voice perfectly level. Don't thank me. I tilted my head slightly, my tone clipped and final. I didn't do it for you. Then I walked out. The corridor was long, the sound of my heels echoing on the polished stone floor. Alex walked silently behind me. It wasn't until we were in the elevator that he finally let out a single word. Damn. I leaned against the elevator wall and exhaled slowly. Where's Lily? Waiting in the car, I had my assistant take her for ice cream. What flavor? Strawberry. I glanced at him. She hates strawberry. She likes mango. Alex blinked. I'll remember that for next time. The elevator reached the ground floor. As the doors opened, sunlight flooded in, so bright I had to squint. The car was parked right out front. The rear window was halfway down, and Lily's small head poked out. Mommy, you're finally done. That took forever. I smiled. A real smile, and opened the car door to slide in beside her. She was holding a cup of ice cream. Mango. Someone had fixed the mistake. Let's go, I told Alex. Where to? Lunch first. I looked down at Lily. What do you want to eat? Sushi. Sushi it is. The car pulled out of the Thorn Enterprises building and merged into the bustling New York traffic. In the rearview mirror, the glass skyscraper shrank, then disappeared around a corner. Lily leaned against me, a small smudge of ice cream on her cheek. Mommy, where are we going to live now? In our home. Can we get a dog? I paused, thinking of the drawing hanging in my living room. 3 lopsided stick figures and a golden retriever that had never existed. Yes, I said, stroking her hair. We'll go pick one out this weekend. Lily cheered, throwing her arms around my neck. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from an unknown number. The area code was from San Francisco. There was only one sentence. Evelyn, heard you finally left the Thorns. Come home. Dad. I stared at that last word for a long time, the city lights flashing across my face, illuminating it in shifting patterns of light and shadow. I didn't reply. I just quietly put the phone away, my fingertips lingering on the clasp of my purse. Beside me, Lily was chattering away about her day at school, about how her deskmate had secretly brought a hamster to class, and how they got to draw a big tree in art class. I turned to her, gently wiping the smudge of ice cream from the corner of her mouth. There was no rush. For now, it was enough to live these days well. As for the stories buried long ago, sooner or later, they would all have to be opened.